Okay, hello everybody. I have Adriana, who is from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. She's going to be discussing a little bit about suicide prevention as well as when I did speak with her at the Tamuk Summer Benefit. She did let me know that she was also going to touch base on some mental health. So as I mentioned before, if you are watching this video pre-recorded, you can always email me or call me to let me know that you have watched the video, or you can comment down below, like watched or finished, and I'll go ahead and submit that training for you. So Adriana, if you want to go ahead and get started, and I'll allow you to share your screen.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Adriana Hovell. I'm the programs manager for South and Southeast Texas of AFSP. Let me get my screen shared. Can everyone see the presentation?
I can't see it. There it is. I see it now.
Still see it? Okay, just making sure. So our presentation is called Talk Saves Lives. The learning objectives that we will learn today are to describe the scope of the problem of suicide, along with key suicide research findings, suicide risk factors and warning signs, and how to seek and offer support to yourself or others at risk, and explain access to crisis resources and services for yourself or others. And we will break down the presentation to the introduction, scope of the problem, research, prevention, and what you can do. So let's get started. Suicide is a complex public health issue, yet despite its complexity, suicide can be prevented, just like there are warning signs and risk factors for other health crises like cardiac arrest. We can learn the warning signs and risk factors that can help us prevent people from dying by suicide. How we talk about suicide matters. Before we get started, I want to go over some terminology that is used when we talk about suicide. It is important to model appropriate language so we do not perpetuate the stigma behind suicide or other mental health conditions. Languages that we avoid saying: committed suicide, failed or successful. If you take a moment and you think about the word committed, typically it's used in conjunction with committed a murder, committed a felony, rape. So this is like the negative stigma that we're trying to break away from. And when you look at failed or successful, it's the same thing. If it failed, that means someone survived the suicide attempt. So technically that is not a failure. And successful means that someone did die by suicide. So that is also not the right wording that we want to use. Instead, we'd rather say died by suicide, ended their life, killed themselves, suicide attempt, or death by suicide. So now we'll go into the scope of the problem. Suicide is a significant issue that affects individuals, families, and communities worldwide. Over 700,000 people die by suicide each year, which means someone dies by suicide every 40 seconds. While this is the most accurate data that we have available, we still believe that this is underreported just because of the stigma and religious beliefs throughout the world. In the United States, suicide rates are recorded by the CDC. While these numbers change every year, the CDC reports the numbers towards the middle of the year. So over 48,000 people died by suicide in 2021. That makes suicide the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. Suicide takes more lives in the US than homicide and natural disasters combined. For every death by suicide, it's estimated that 25 others will make an attempt. That's well over 1 million Americans each year who survive a suicide attempt. Suicide impacts individuals and communities. The best way I like to describe this is when you throw a rock in a pool of water, those little rings that you see as they grow out. First, it's obviously the family, friends, church, school, Just think of it that way, how it just expands by losing one person in your community. So let's move on to research. Over the past several decades, scientists have been studying suicide. Research is shedding light on many critical areas, like what drives up risk, what the amounts to effective suicide prevention, and we still have much more to learn. One main question is, why do people take their own lives? There's no single cause, but rather multiple intersecting factors. Research has consistently shown that the large majority of people who die by suicide have a mental health condition at the time of their death. This may or may not have been recognized by the person or their loved ones, or may have not been diagnosed or adequately treated at the time. With that being said, research has also made it clear that mental conditions cannot be the whole story. The vast majority of people who have these health conditions do not die by suicide. The brains of people who die by suicide differ from those who die from other causes, both in structure and function. And this is typically seen in impulse controls areas of the brain. We have also learned that most people who are suicidal are ambivalent about taking their life. Part of them wants to live and part of them wants to die. The perspective of a suicidal person, they've reached a crisis point. They're desperate to escape the pain, and thinking becomes limited. So the best way to describe this, if you can think back to when you've had severe pain, for some people it's childbirth, kidney stones, heart attack, things like that. Now think of someone coming up to you and asking you for directions to your nearest HEB or grocery store. At that time, you're really not going to focus on helping someone get to a grocery store because you're in so much pain. It's the same thing for someone in suicidal crisis. They're in severe emotional pain, and all they want to do is get away from that pain. So now let's discuss who's at risk. Risk factors are defined as characteristics or conditions that increase the chance of a person that may take their life. And looking at this, it's health, historical, and environmental. Health factors, mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, substance use disorders, as well as physical health factors, serious or chronic health conditions, including chronic pain or traumatic brain injuries, are also factors. Historical factors such as a family history of suicide or a family history of mental health conditions, childhood abuse, previous suicide attempts, or a loss in the family, regardless if it is to suicide or not. Environmental factors such as access to lethal means, exposure/contagion, prolonged stress, or stressful life events. So it's important to take in consideration what others see. It's not always what you see, like the person sitting there who clearly looks a little distraught. They might have a genetic risk disposition already. They may be depressed. They may be severely stressed at work, drinking more than usual. The importance of research is that we are currently looking for biomarkers, something that could be testable in blood samples to identify those who are at risk, a number of clinical treatments like therapy that are effective for suicidal people, interventions, and medication. Now we will focus on prevention. So just like there's risk factors, there's protective factors, mental health care, family and community support, problem-solving skills, and in certain situations, cultural and religious beliefs as well can be a positive factor. Mental health care is an important ingredient for preventing suicide. We need a culture where everyone knows to be smart about mental health and getting help when it's needed. being proactive about your mental health, seeing a family doctor or mental health physician, getting an evaluation, discussing about treatment options, finding what works best for you, because it's not one size fits all for everyone. Some people do need medication, some people do well with just therapy. The law now requires insurance plans to cover mental health services the same as they would physical health services. And I know a couple of years ago, this came into effect with Obamacare, and most people still struggle, but there is important to know that the law does require mental health coverage. Just like people find strategies that optimize their physical health, people can do the same thing for the mental health. And if you look at these examples like exercise, sleep, healthy diet, and stress management, this is all the same things you would do to keep your body physically healthy. Prevention efforts also include support for those touched by suicide. The loss of one person to suicide profoundly impacts many. It's important that survivors have the support that they need, both to heal and to reduce their own suicide risk. The important thing you can put between a suicidal person and their way of ending their life is time. Research shows that by temporarily reducing a suicidal person's access to lethal means, we give that person time. So some examples of limiting access to means is how now cars have carbon monoxide sensors in them and they'll turn off. Blister packaging or those child-proof packagings on medicine bottles. If you ever think about it, that's why now you'll see in many communities with bridges that they have barriers. Another important thing is securing your firearms, just putting gun locks, putting them in safes, or not keeping ammunition in the house. What can we do? It's important to have a caring, supportive conversation with someone you might be worried about to allow them to share what they're experiencing. A conversation is a way to show that you care and allows you to gain more information about how distressed they are. Let's start talking about suicide warning signs and what you should watch out for yourself and in others. So we'll discuss taught behavior and mood in more detail. Many people who are suicidal talk about ending their lives. They may be direct or indirect about it. A person may say it outright, or they might say it as a joke, but it's very important to take it seriously. So you'll hear phrases of ending their lives, having no reason to live, feeling like they're a burden to others, being in unbearable pain, or feeling trapped are some phrases that suicidal people will use. Behavior that is atypical for an individual should also encourage you to speak to that person. If you see them consuming more alcohol or drugs, having issues with sleep, which could be sleeping too much or not getting enough sleep, acting recklessly, withdrawing from activities that they once loved, isolating from family or friends, looking for ways to kill themselves. And that could be like research or asking questions, going to a pawn shop or academy to get a weapon of some sort, or giving away possessions. People at risk for suicide can display, often quite subtly, any of these following moods, such as depression, apathy, rage, irritability, impulsivity, humiliation, anxiety, or sudden unexplained happiness. So this one I always feel like I need to elaborate a little bit more on. So that is, if you see someone that has been severely depressed for months on end, and sometimes they're very, very happy, research has found that that is sometimes the moment that person has decided that they are going to take their life and they've made their plan. And so they know their pain is coming to an end. There's a lot of things that you would need to look at, but it's always important to trust your instincts, to trust your gut, and assume that you're all going to be the only one that reaches out. We've always heard those stories where people said, I wish I had said something. That's why we always want to remind you to trust your gut. You know this person best. If you see warning signs, reach out to the person that you are concerned about. But then we'll discuss a couple of ways to listen. What you should do to avoid is minimize their feelings, convince them that life is worth living, or giving them that quick fix solution. Instead, what we encourage you to do is to make sure that this conversation is private. If you take them to a different room, have it one, it's best one-on-one, but if you need to talk to them on the phone, that also works as well. Listen to their story, express concern and caring, ask directly about suicidal thoughts, which means don't use the phrase, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Or are you thinking of doing something stupid? It's more of, are you thinking of killing yourself or ending your life? It needs to be that direct. Encourage them to seek help. If you think they might make an attempt on their life soon, stay with them. Do not leave them alone. However, if the situation puts your own safety at risk, immediately leave the area and call 911. Help them remove lethal means or remove themselves from any potential dangerous areas and escort them to mental health services or the emergency room. And here is 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you press 1, it's for veterans, 2 for Spanish, and 3 for LGBTQ. We also have the crisis text line. If the person rather text, because we know now that's a big thing with the younger generations. And for any suicide in process, then calling 911. Together, we can create a culture that's smart about mental health, will save lives, and vastly improve the lives of many others. But that's all I had.
Thank you so much, Adriana. What are, I mean, so you're part of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, right?
Yes.
So are there any other resources that y'all offer? I mean, I know we kind of had talked briefly on it. Do y'all, I guess, offer any type of resources maybe for families that have gone through maybe a parent or a child, anybody who has, you
Yeah.
know,
Let me show you our website, and this is the best resource that we have. So let me go here. So if everything you'll locate easier. For me, it's easier to tell everyone to scroll all the way to the bottom.
okay,
If you know you have someone that is having thoughts, it
okay,
gives you 988, the Veterans Crisis Line information, the text line, their suicide prevention resources, how to find a mental health professional in your area, because we all know it's different for every area.
right,
There's also, if you know someone that has survived an attempt, they also need resources. What do you need to do immediately after? How do I get there? Interacting with family and friends, because we know suicide is a unique loss, but it is also surviving a suicide attempt is also unique in itself.
yeah.
Coming up with a safety plan and how to do that. There's videos about coping and resilience as well. Let me scroll all the way down. If you have lost someone, there's also resources on our webpage. Finding a support group, most of them now after the pandemic are virtual. So if distance is a barrier for some people, there is that option as well. Our program Healing Conversations is another thing that we offer, which is volunteer-based. It's a peer-to-peer conversation. You have to be removed from your loss at a minimum of 2 years, but it's a one-time conversation with someone that can truly say, I've been in your shoes and I know what it feels like. And then what, let me see. If someone's at risk, how to find treatment, and then this link is solely to help you find a suicide loss group in your area or online.
Okay.
But our
Okay,
website is
Adriana,
really,
so if we just Googled suicide prevention, would we get a link to this website?
afsp.org would be the best way. That way you can find it rather quickly.
Right. I'm just thinking, if you can't remember all that, should be able to find it.
I
American
believe so.
Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Yes, so AFSP home does show up after the 988 crisis line.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I didn't have any other questions. I know the one thing that we did talk about too at the fair was you also do one specifically for children as well, right? You have like a
Yes.
presentation specifically.
Yes, and I can show you a little bit about that now. So if you go under programs, it's called It's Real. So the teen programming is a little different from our signature program, which is what you just saw, the Talk Saves Lives presentation.
Mhm.
So what it talks about is, what is mental health? Why is it important? And the importance of self-care. And then it gives, because we all know, teens will go to themselves before they go to an adult for help.
Yeah.
So it's kind of giving, what I love about that presentation, it gives them like scenarios, like, what if my friend tells me something and they don't want me to tell anyone? My favorite thing to tell them at that point is, don't promise them, because you'd rather break the promise to keep your friend safe than your friend not being here anymore.
Yeah.
It's okay for your friend to be mad at you for a couple of months and them still be here. So it gives them those scenarios. It also says, like, it's okay not to feel super all the time, which is true. We all don't always are happy sunshines every day. There are days where we're okay to be mad or sad or feel just not good.
Yeah.
And then it reminds them, what is self-care? Why is it important? Because it keeps your mental health in a better spot. And we have that module for middle school age students, high school, and college.
And so this where it says it's real, so like if you click on it, do y'all have videos on those pages that give those kind of scenarios?
No, that
No?
is the
Okay.
presentation that you would need to schedule if
You
you
need to
want to
schedule.
see. But yes, it does give you a little bit of a highlight of what they will learn. Things like that. And then this is one of the slides on the page, on the presentation itself.
Got it.
Any other questions or anything else we wanted to see?
And I guess the only other question that I would have is, so if you call into the hotline,
Yes.
right, for you feel like maybe somebody around you, do you, and I know because it's kind of like the way it is with like CPS right now, sometimes like they'll kind of notify you, I guess, whether or not do you, like if you're the person calling in for somebody else, do you get notified of what the result was or anything like that?
From my understanding, they do a follow-up call, but it
Okay.
depends on when the area that it's located in, if
Okay.
that makes sense. Because 988 is still fairly new. It is 2 years. It hit a 2-year anniversary earlier this month.
Okay.
But it still needs quite a bit of funding. It's not as vast as 911, but the idea and the goal is to get it as vast. We do work in advocacy as well, and at a national level, we were asking for the funding to go towards geo routing instead, because currently in Texas, I know like Houston has a 988 call center, Austin has one. So you will get routed, like I moved from Houston to Corpus.
Yeah.
If I were to call 988 on myself or anyone, they would route me to Houston.
Okay.
Not if Corpus had one, based off of my area code. So they're
Mhm.
looking for funding for that to route based off of
Where you're actually
you're
located.
actually at and not your area code. Also funding to build out the call centers because they are getting inundated right now with calls.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that that's a
Yes.
resource that individuals can utilize. If they're feeling that way or if they know someone that may be feeling that way. That was the question as well I wanted to know, because sometimes some people might, ask that question, well, am I gonna know, like, if I do call for somebody, kind of wanting to, I mean, obviously they're gonna, if it's somebody close to them, they're gonna kind of know a little bit whether or not they've seen a change or anything like that. But if it's somebody who's just kind of not as close, but it's kind of like, hey, I know this person, if whether or not they would get notified of any kind of follow-up that they did. All right, unless anybody else has any other questions. All right. Adriana, well, thank you so much for taking the time today to speak with us. If any of my volunteer supervisors feel like they might want a little bit more education on, because we do work with kids, I will give them your contact information as well as our volunteers. If they have any other questions like that, maybe they have a child that they would like to send, a couple of stuff to. But I will obviously reach out to you in the near future as well. We're always doing, meetings, and we also have events as well that we utilize that we can always invite you to. So thank you again for taking the time to speak with us.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you everybody for joining. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.